Welcome everyone. It is IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and the only news program around that gives you spiritual advice for real life and for your spiritual journey. Tonight we're going to dive into a painful and challenging topic for many: mass shootings and other acts of violence. Unfortunately, such events are an increasing trend, and not just in the United States, but all over the world. Focused primarily in the Western world, but spreading to many different countries. This was a special request topic from our group of enthusiastic IKYA students in Munich, Germany. So a warm greetings to our watch party in Munich. And they asked for this topic because there was recently a mass shooting in Germany. And again, this kind of event is increasing across the world and is spread all over the news. In the United States, where I come from, there's almost a numbness that has developed because it happens so often. Fortunately, that has not spread around the world as much, but it's a very important topic, and many people are wondering and have asked in various arenas, IKYA, why mass shootings? What do they mean? What's the purpose? Why are they increasing? That's where we want to open tonight.
Topic. And just to give you perspective, if you're not aware of this, in the USA alone, there are about 50 mass shootings per month. It's more than 1.5 per day. So it's become normal, right? And it's not just mass shootings. Like when we look at the States and the rest of the world, it's all these acts of kind of mass violence. And there is an interesting pattern behind this. And it's basically, first we have to look at what I often describe as the complexity gap. That life today is too complex for the human life form. Humans have developed by living simpler lives, and the way we live now, it's so new that we do not have the genetics and the natural kind of programmings to deal with it. It's too difficult. But when we also look at the culture in the world today, where we're supposed to be someone, and we're told we can be anything, and we should have success, and we can do anything if we put our mind to it. That type of culture, what happens when you don't succeed, when you feel disenfranchised, and especially when we do not live in small communities anymore. Think of like if someone did something to you a few hundred years back, you would know who it was, right? And you could have your enemy and you could like fight it out or kill that person. Today it's much more difficult. And because we also, especially in the West, we have nurtured this victim narrative, right? You deserve to have what you want in life. You deserve respect. You deserve to be seen. And when we combine all of that, it's a really, toxic soup. Because we are told that we deserve everything, but we're not responsible. So when we're not able to become in life what we want, or we feel that we're not seen, we're not respected, we create the story that it's them. It's the big they. It's the big them. Because you don't know who it is, but you know that you're not responsible for your own failures. It has to be them. So when you create the story about them, you've already established yourself as a victim. And so many people in the world today, they live in this narrative. Someone else is responsible because society is too big. The structures are too big. It's difficult to have any form of influence. and yet we feel controlled by it. Many people who live in under the exact same conditions are able to achieve success and build their lives and all of that without the victim stories. It's about understanding the rules of the game and then using it to your advantage. But some people are not able to do that. And especially if they feel, I should have succeeded, I would have succeeded, but it's because of them. They stopped me, they did not respect me, they did not give me what I'm entitled to. They are responsible. You create the story of them, but because it's not a singular person, it's more the idea of them. How do you fight, right? So, these mass shootings or mass killings are expressions of this type of psychology, this way of thinking. Because you're convinced that you are not responsible for your own failures in life. It's them. And then you just need people that represent the kind of symbol of the big them. And you feel justified. Just the way, when you know someone has done something to you, and that is your story, you feel that you're justified in your attack or your aggression towards that person. But when it's the big them, you're frustrated. You can't negotiate with the big them. So you need revenge. You need to say enough is enough. And then it's basically whoever. So it comes from this strange place we are in our society where we nurture the victim narrative. And it's so easy to do that. It's an easy sell since we live in this complexity gap where our civilization is far too advanced for our genetics. And within that kind of space, we make up all sorts of things. Our religious brain will create a lot of different stories. And we feel that we're not in control of our own lives anymore. But we are. There have always been rules of the game. There have always been different games. Now it's just very complicated, very, it's difficult to understand the rules and difficult to win. So it must be them. This is the same type of environment in our minds where we develop the conspiracy theories. That's always about the big them who do things to stop me. It starts with a very narcissistic way of thinking. Right? We're being controlled and they want to control me. They are stopping me. They're not giving me what I deserve. They're not respecting me. And the big they are simply people, in different positions, yes, but when we climb the ladder of our civilization, it's still just people being as stupid as people on the bottom, but with more power. But still, remember, you choose to incarnate exactly where you incarnate, under those exact conditions, because they represent what you need to be confronted with in yourself. So you're being triggered by your own patterns. That's why it hurts. Right? You choose to incarnate in a time and a place, in the planet and the culture that can represent your karma, your shortcomings, your pain points. And the purpose of the world is to trigger you, trigger your pain points, so you take action. Normally that would be to take responsibility, to shape our own life, our own futures based on the rules of the game. But with this victim culture that we have right now, it's so easy to blame. And we thereby take away our own spiritual opportunity to learn. Because these are the conditions, right? In your life, those are the rules. And then you grow, then you learn based on those rules, because you live in your own game. So by blaming everybody because you are not able to get the results you want, it's a complete distraction. And when we believe that this is a way to do it, and we feel the pain points and we feel the rage, this is what we get. So it's also an expression of this culture. And this is why it's spreading. The United States definitely is the worst when it comes to this. But it's also been the country that has been perpetuating this story that you should be successful, right? It's all up to you. And also nurturing the victim narrative. So it's not difficult to see why this is happening, but this culture is spreading. The expectations that we have towards life. And remember also the consumer culture is part of this, because we just want things to work. We're never responsible anymore, right? It's a corporation. If something doesn't work, we complain. And if we don't feel well, we complain because we're not seen. We're not taken care of, right? So we are consumers in all parts of our lives. Of course, we get very angry when things don't go our way, but we incarnate to be confronted, to be triggered, because we're not normally able to trigger ourselves, to find our own pain points and where we need to work. So we incarnate so life can show us. This culture is such a distraction from spiritual work. And it's important that we as spiritual students that we don't follow that, right? But we can observe it and see what's happening in the world and understand it. But we should not fall into the same traps. You are 100% responsible for absolutely everything, all the time. Because everything you ever experience is part of your own path, your own karma, and your own potentials. Do we have any comments or questions?
Well, one question that arises a lot is, what is it particularly about the United States that leads to the intense weapon culture? Because in the discussion around mass shootings and acts of violence, there's always that sort of tug of war between, is it access to weapons, or is it, the consciousness, the mental health, all of those kinds of things. So what's your perspective on that part of the discussion?
Well, I think this is a really interesting question, because we have then to look at how the United States came about. It was a hostile takeover, right? It was an invasion. And remember that the first people who came to the States, they were refugees, religious refugees. So they basically fled from Europe for religious reasons, but also to escape poverty and all of that. Right? So they were already in a mindset of fighting for their lives and fighting for their freedom. And then they invaded a country, and they were at war with the Native Americans. And because there were so many different cultures, and it was basically lawlessness in the United States for a very long time, you had to protect yourself. So it's ingrained in the culture that anyone can be an enemy. Anyone. So when you look at Europe and other parts of the world that are a lot older, you have a sense of we-ness, right? When you belong to a country and your family has been there for generations, live in the same area, same culture, you get a sense of we-ness and a common understanding of common values that you share. And you have to understand that we're in this together. The United States started based on people who felt ostracized. And then they had to fight for their lives, and it was very difficult to find common ground. So it was basically, I have to fight for myself, I can't trust anyone. And what that is the fabric of society, it's natural that you don't develop that sense of we-ness and community. And this is also why Americans are so obsessed with community, right? They find it in sports, in church. They try to find common ground because that's how you determine that you're not an enemy. In most other countries, you're not an enemy because we live in the same country, we're the same people. So the United States is quite unique in that it started, as a construct of immigrants, traumatized immigrants, and that became the culture. So then you need to protect yourself because anyone can be your enemy, and you start by assuming someone is an enemy, right? It's this cliche thing where you see someone with a shotgun on their lawn saying, "Get off my lawn," or "I shoot your fucking head off," right? And that's how many people look at Americans in the gun culture. But in the United States, it's like, yeah, because you're my enemy until you've proven that you're not. So you look for markers of common ground, and then you decide, so when you belong to the same religion or this, root for the same teams, whatever it is, when you can find common ground, then you know you're not an enemy. In Europe, you assume that you're not an enemy, right? So it's a very, very different culture and can be difficult for people in other parts of the world to understand what's going on in the States because this level of kind of assuming that someone is your enemy, it's the kind of base note of all social interaction. And then you look for the clues. And you're fast to judge if they don't share your views. So also what's happening now politically is happening because of this. So it's quite natural they would have more guns in the States and that they feel that if they don't have their guns to protect them, that their enemies will get them. They have to protect themselves. So it's this assumption. And we don't have that in other parts of the world. This is also why, for instance, in Europe, we don't need as many guns because we assume that people are friendly, that we're on the same team. It doesn't mean that Europeans are more advanced. It's simply that the cultural fabric is different.
So we have a question about starting to explore the spiritual learning, because on a horizontal level or a reactionary level, of course, mass shootings and active violence, the response is always, control guns or, get people better mental health care or, we need to lock up our schools or, all of these kinds of things. It's mainly, number one, a blame game, right? And trying to, pin responsibility on someone other than myself, whoever that myself might be, it seems like. And it's always, as with so many things nowadays, these mass acts of violence also seem to be such an acute and heated arena for victim consciousness. And we're just kind of curious, what's the spiritual perspective on why these things need to unfold and how could we, lift out of that morass?
I think one interesting aspect of this, which is always difficult to talk about in the horizontal reality in society because it sounds like victim blaming. Number one, there is no such thing as victim. From a spiritual perspective, understand that you choose where you incarnate. You choose everything about it. And you also choose how that life ends. So, when you are part of something like that, in the receiving end of it, it's something that you have gravitated towards. It's something that you need in your own spiritual studies. So when we think of all of life just being souls incarnating in different constellations and different versions and different movements, we all get exactly what we need, meaning life is mirroring our own process. So what could possibly be kind of learned from being in the receiving end of, a mass shooting, for instance? Now, when we understand that the person doing this is normally influenced by what we just talked about. So when we are in the receiving end, it also means that we are also studying this. It means that we also have a sense of entitlement. We also have this sense of the big they and all of these other things. It's not necessarily kind of crystallized in our mind, but it's part of what we're studying. And when we study something, remember that we always study life. We study ourselves, and all our interactions are about us as consciousness, as a spirit, figuring out what we are, how life works, and how to deal with it. It means that this is then something that we are studying. And then that we're experiencing is a trigger. Understand that we exist forever. We go in and out of lifetimes and forms. And as soul, going in and out of a lifetime is as easy as when you play a video game. You start the game and it's game over and, that was a fun game. It's like that. So you really don't care about what happens in itself. It's what you learn. And you will always be mirrored by your own karmic process. And this is why nothing is happening to you. It's always the outer rendering of your own consciousness. So before you choose a lifetime, you know exactly what you're going to study and why and how. So you're never a victim, you are a co-creator. And often it's just like in a game, you need different roles. You need different individuals to do different things to set up the scene so everyone can learn. It's important to remember that no matter what happens, spiritually, everybody has agreed to be part of it for different reasons, but it's always about learning and healing. And one can then ask, how can something like that be healing? It is because when something happens, it means that whatever is inside of you will surface. You will be triggered. Just like I always say that the illness is the beginning of the healing. Karmically, you are more blocked before the illness comes because it's still in you vibrationally, and the kind of blockage of consciousness is still there. But it's only when it surfaces and it becomes a manifestation, and then you study through it and you deal with it. In these horizontal realities, that's basically how we kind of decode our own consciousness and our own blockages and how we then work with them. So therefore, when you get an illness, that's it's the beginning of the healing process. And it's the same thing with all other types of manifestations. They trigger, they make things come to the surface, and then you go through your pain and your suffering and your healing. But it's never about what is happening in the manifested level. It's what's going on in your consciousness and how you grow and what you learn about yourself and about life. So we need absolutely every form of experience, every angle, every variation. So in a bigger picture, this is just yet another type, right? Based on what we discussed in the beginning.
So if we as spiritual students are in a way, it's not productive to support the victim narrative. What role can we play to also lift like the healing potential if we happen to have family or friends or or be involved in this kind of incident? How can we assist?
Buy more guns. No, it's. I think it's, it's difficult in this society to talk about spiritual principles, to talk about what's actually happening, because humans are so invested in their narratives, in their stories, and their political understanding. And it's very difficult to go beyond that, but we have to try. Many people are also in the process of awakening, right? They are beginning to connect, they're beginning to understand there has to be something else going on here. And when we look at the world and how crazy it is, more and more people are saying that this can't be real. This cannot be what is actually happening. And they begin to connect, and their mind is beginning to kind of deconstruct the world in different ways, because that's the natural, healthy reaction. When it becomes too crazy, we start asking questions like, what is really going on here? And when we're too limited by our kind of horizontal mind, we then often fall into the trap of going in the religious direction with conspiracy theories and blame and all that. But we can also use it to stimulate our awakening. So, okay, no matter what's happening in the world, I have to take the wheel. I have to then create and shape the life I want. Right? I need to use this world in order to heal myself and heal others. So when we want to support, when we want to heal and nurture, we cannot at the same time believe the game. We can't believe the narratives. And just assisting people out of this victim culture that we're in. And understand that, as I always say, no matter who did what to you, you are the only one who can heal. And if we want to heal, then we have to take responsibility. And when people say, well, I can't take responsibility for what they didn't know, I'm asking you to take responsibility for your healing. Right? Which means understanding that you are the only one who can heal you. And as long as you're stuck in that story that they did this, it means that you believe that something has to happen to them before you can heal. And then it will never happen. So when you are able to detach what happened and your stories to the simple understanding that no matter, who did what, I'm the only one who can heal me. You can then focus on that and take responsibility for your healing, and you can let other people take responsibility for their actions, but you also understand that's none of your business. We're all on different journeys, including people who do horrendous things. But when we think of it, we all fantasize about killing people. If you say, I've never done that, you're lying. It's natural, right? In traffic. How many times have you fantasized about killing someone, right? And it's like in all life situations, it's natural to see killing your enemies as a solution. We should not feel, there's nothing wrong with it. We are animals. This life form here is an animal. And it's the natural solution in nature to show that level of aggression. But most people don't. It stays in that kind of fantasy, and we understand that, yeah, I can vent, I can imagine, that I kill all these people because they really deserve it. But when we think about it and we cool down, we move out of that story, because we also know that that's not necessarily very productive. But some people they have a difficulty navigating this, right? So some people do terrible things because they're not able to control, how they respond to things, and they create all these stories, and there's this very strong sense of them, and it's natural. So we must expect in this world that this will continue to increase. Mm-hmm.
So first we have a question from Isabel in Germany about how does shooting for sport fit into this? Because she has a family member who shoots for sport, and I think not for hunting, but just for, at the
Right.
shooting range or something. But then there's also the question about shooting animals and other creatures, and
Mm-hmm.
how does that fit into this wider discussion of mass violence?
Not at all, really, because hunting and going to war has been part of human existence forever. Ever since humans came down from the trees and formed groups and societies, humans have been at war. They've been hunting. And for many people, shooting can be an act of empowerment. They can feel like, yeah, don't mess with me, bitch, right? And that's a good feeling. So going to the shooting range, for most people, is just fun, but you can also feel empowered, and you can fantasize a little bit about, but don't mess with me. And that's a good feeling. There's absolutely no connection between that and the psychology of mass shootings. I think many people can actually use going to the range as a way to vent, right? Where they can then, imagine that they're like shooting at all the terrible people in traffic that they want to kill, right? They can get rid of a lot of aggression. For some people, it's just sport. You go through that first, part, and then it's just a sport. It's interesting, right? Because it takes concentration. And it takes focus. And for many people, that can actually become meditation. Because if you want to hit bullseye, you can't just shoot. You have to be focused. And then it becomes meditation and precision. So there is no connection between the two at all. When it comes to shooting animals, yes, there are always individuals who will be sadistic and they love killing things. That's always been the case. There are not kind of more people enjoying to kill now than in the old days. It's actually quite the opposite. Human history is quite bloody. And humans used to kill each other all the time. So we are more peaceful now than we used to, because we have a better framework in society. But as animals, we still have it in us. So for most people, when they hunt, it's not really about killing the animal. It's the genetic sensation of hunting and being together and being sharpened and being excited. And for a lot, especially guys, because normally it's guys going hunting, it's that very kind of deep genetic triggering of doing things men have done together for tens of thousands of years. And it feels good. And for many guys, it can kind of give them a sense of grounding and togetherness and connectedness. So that also becomes meditation. And for many people, hunting can be beautiful. It connects them to life and death. I'm not talking about release the geese and then I'll aim, it's like when you're out there in nature and you hunt old school. For many, it can be a beautiful experience. And humans have always hunted for food, so there's nothing unethical about it. But humans are in many different levels of consciousness and many different journeys. And remember that we all have the ability to kill in us. all of you would be able to kill someone under the right circumstances or the wrong circumstances. We have it in us. It's part of being human. It's just a matter of, is it worth it? Right? So when people go to these extremes, it's because they think it's worth it. To them, it's the rational thing to do, because they're fighting the big them.
Okay, we have a question in the audience, Elisabeth.
I just remember reading somewhere that there was a big actual racial difference in the United States between who commits mass shootings, and then it's a bigger proportion of white people committing those crimes.
Of course.
And I was just wondering if you'd say something about why.
Oh, I think it's quite natural. And remember that being white in the United States today is very difficult, especially also if you're a white male, a white young male. Because of politics, because of like everything, you know, there's an opening in the public discourse, you know, over the last decades, where everyone trying to include everyone. And because, like, when you do that, and you also nurture the victim consciousness, then it's all about blaming someone. So, being male today, right, then you're a terrible person because you're a male, because you're the one who've like done everything. And if you're white, right, you know, so one can be racist towards white people. And the thing is that when we look at the facts, white people are not the most successful anymore. It's different, and white males are not necessarily the most successful. But it becomes this also rage, right? You want to blame someone, you want to attack someone because it makes you feel good, it makes you feel powerful. So the white male has become the one to attack if you feel marginalized, right? And then a lot of white males can feel extremely frustrated because they can't do anything right at this point. Of course they can, but also understand that there are a lot of individuals who don't understand how to navigate this new reality. And it is really important that our culture changes to make everyone feel included. But it doesn't mean that we should attack each other. And we have to grow past racism, because it's not true that white people are more racist. Everybody's racist. Because it's not really about race, it's about people who are not like us. We're all like that in so many different ways. So but as the culture is opening up and we have to embrace diversity and include everyone, this is natural, because the white, you know, Caucasians and males have traditionally been on top, right? So now everyone attacks that. So, and it's natural, it will pass. It's just a phase. But for a lot of young males, they can then feel that they're being attacked for no reason, right? Because they can feel it. And they haven't done anything because they're not old enough yet, right? So many young men white men can feel that it's over already, right? They're not being included. And when you then belong to a culture where the white male is supposed to be successful, supposed to be the one making something of himself and all that, so white males will often meet a lot of, you know, expectation, right? And then they have this wall, this cultural wall now, that can make it very difficult. And they have to learn the new rules and all of that. It's very frustrating. And when you then have males with no kind of support, because when you look at most males who do these things, white males, they come from a background where they did not have the support, and you know, they did not experience white privilege, you know, but they're being blamed for it, right? And there are so many different, of course, variations around this. But I think in the United States now, a young white male is probably the most difficult thing you can be. And it doesn't sound politically correct, but if we go a couple of decades into the future, when we'll look back at this point, one will see that, yeah, we could have handled this differently, but we can't, because now we have to let everyone get a voice. And then it will be about taking the microphone as much as possible from white males, right? It's bound to happen. But this is also one aspect that kind of fuels this, and also means that white males are predominantly the ones doing this.
Okay, we have a question from Anna in Finland on Zoom. Let's see.
Hey, yes, I have a question what comes to young kids and news. That should we protect young kids from the news and not let them watch or listen so much, because obviously there is a lot of violence like this mass shooting, war and murders and so on? Or should we instead watch news more with young kids also and study them and explain how to observe news and what we can learn? Because, for example, my 8-year-old son he's very interested about the news. So I've been thinking lately that what to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's an excellent question. It is very difficult today to understand how to protect our kids. But remember that in many ways we can't protect them anymore. We have to prepare them. We have to make them competent and strong. Now, if you lived in a war zone, would the best thing be to tell your kids that, no, there is no war, everybody's happy, let's have a good time? Or would it be better to teach them how to be a warrior? Right? And we've come to that point in our culture where protecting our kids can actually be a disservice. We need to balance, because they have to deal with the world when they grow up. And if you think the world at this point is difficult, wait a decade. We have to prepare our kids for the world they're living in. They have access to social media. If we don't give them the devices, their friends will have them. They will watch porn. They will watch everything, right? And we can't just pretend that they live in the world that kids did a few decades back, because that world does not exist. This is a very complex and confusing and dangerous world. And it's easy to say, we want kids to be kids. Yeah, kids throughout human history have been many different things. Until recently, kids would start working, from the time they could walk. They would help, they would do chores, they would work the fields, and they would be part of life. This thing where let kids be kids, that's new. We can protect them somewhat. I think we should shield them from the worst stuff, but we need to talk with them about how the world is. It's basically today also, for instance, in the States, most parents will have to tell their kids that you should not listen to strangers. You should not trust them. If we go back a few decades, you should listen to all grown-ups, even like strangers, because they would be part of your upbringing. Your neighbors could basically smack you. They could be kind of part of setting the boundaries and teaching you how to be a decent human being. Today, you could be kidnapped and sexually abused, right? You can't, it's a different world. So most parents in the States and many other places, they have to talk with their kids about what's happening and what to look out for, because you can't trust anyone. Like, kids are trusting individuals. They're supposed to be, right? But today, the world has changed. So it's that. Letting kids be kids is not necessarily a good strategy. Prepare them. Make them strong. Educate them. But teach them how to navigate. So I think, let them watch some of the news, but always create an established context. Make them understand. Because kids are not able, and their brain has not yet created the barrier between reality and fantasy. So when they have all these impressions, their minds can make it larger, and it can be extremely scary. So yes, we have to protect them somewhat, but we need to introduce them to the world they have actually incarnated in. And we also need to remember, they chose this. They chose this world. They chose this exact moment, because this is how they can be on their karmic journey. So in a way, we need to both weaponize them and give them the survival skills, help them to develop their talents so they can go out into the world and not be scared. Remember that besides the world being a dangerous, scary place, humans have never had more opportunity and potential than right now. But you can't get to the potential, you can't get to the good stuff if you're struggling. So we need to build strength. We need to be competent. We need to understand ourselves. We need to understand life. And we need to understand how to navigate. Because if we're only stuck in trying to avoid bad things to happen, we will never reach the potentials. Right? So we need, as people, to educate ourselves, to develop ourselves, to become the best version so we can reach those potentials. It is so important with kids today that we don't teach them to be scared, that we don't teach them to hold back, but to learn the rules of the game and go out there and slay.
Sonia here in Norway is curious about Europe and the meeting of cultures. Here in Norway, we had a mass shooting this past summer when an extreme Islamic shooter shot outside of a gay bar. So the clash of Islam and the homosexual community. Some years back, there was Charlie Hebdo in France, and there are many more examples. But she's curious about how is this dynamic around mass shootings different in Europe from the United States, and how do we maybe navigate differently than in the United States?
Number one, in the United States, there's 1.6 mass shootings a day. And what you mentioned took place over many years. So we've had in Europe a few mass shootings over the last 20 years. Fewer than what happens in a week in the United States. Right? So it's not really comparable at all. You will always have individuals, right? But the culture in Europe, as we talked about, is so different. There is a we-ness. There is this sense of sharing culture, being in the same kind of boat, and having to find solutions, and that we're in this together. So the thought of being completely kind of like pushed out, not belonging, that everyone's your enemy, very few people have those thoughts. You will always have individuals, and most of them are, they need medical attention. As many of you are aware, we had a mass shooting in Norway, the only mass shooting we've ever had. And he killed about 70 people or something. And obviously he had severe mental issues. So there will always be those people. But we don't have mass shootings as a cultural expression. So it cannot really be compared. But of course, with immigration, with migration, all of that, more people feel that they don't fit in. They look at the big they, right? And then it could be the whole culture of a country that you're in, because you feel I can't express myself. And often, again, you put yourself in the role of the victim, and the moment you do, you've already blamed the big them. Because otherwise, how can you be a victim? Right? And it can also be, for instance, when someone will attack a certain group. It's because they believe that this group affects them somehow. It becomes a they. For instance, there will always be people that think that, for instance, in the States, there's a lot of talk about like the LGBTQAI plus agenda, right? And that was the Jewish agenda, the Muslim agenda. There's always, when we create the they have plans to manipulate and control the minds of the innocent. It's always that. And when we combine all of this, we all belong to one of those groups. All of us. And that's why it's so silly. All people just want to have decent lives. Everybody wants to be respected. Everybody wants love. Everybody wants to be seen. Everyone wants to feel a sense of purpose. And again, when we don't, it's so easy to put ourselves in the role of the victim and then blame someone. And we need to find someone to blame. Right? Just like you in your life, maybe you're blaming your parents. They did their best. They were just humans. Yeah, maybe they're even terrible people, but yeah, they're allowed to be terrible people, and they're also allowed to have kids. And you chose them. Right? But yet, yeah, it's sport that most people play to blame their parents for everything that's wrong in their lives. We need to find someone to blame. And again, the victim culture, that is really the core of what we're talking about today. That is extremely dangerous. Not very healthy. And from a spiritual perspective, it's an impossible thought, because you are the creator. You're an aspect of the divine. Everything that you experience is simply you unpacking your own consciousness and to learn about yourself and your own blockages. That's all. So whenever something is happening to you, it's happening for you. It's happening for your benefit, so you can learn about yourself so that you can grow and heal. There is nothing else ever going on. So as a spiritual student, we need to eradicate the thought of victimhood. Is that it's not possible. I am always responsible. And the world is simply the echo of whatever I send out. That includes my parents, that includes everyone, because they become, the screen, onto which I project my own karma, and then it's reflected, and then I'm triggered. But we need always to be responsible. And that's also how we avoid being part of this energy.
Okay, we have a question from Sara here in the audience.
Yeah, so basically just seeing the victim soup that we're all in, and personally I see it's really hard to work yourself out of that, because it's like automatically we just go in there. And it's almost like politically incorrect to be empowered unless you were victim first, and then it's like just to be a powerful individual in general is like almost like, you know, calm down a bit, you know, yeah. And also just thinking about how hard it is to create that and go past that victimhood consciousness. It's almost like we're all being squeezed now, is that what you're saying, to become like into spirituality, to actually, that's the only solution as what you're presenting. It's actually just going into that instead, because what else is there to do?
Yeah, but I think
If you want to choose something else, it's almost like we're being squeezed into, we have to take responsibility and be spiritual.
yes, it's like, you know, we have to learn from the woke, and we need to cancel the idea of victimhood. Cancel it. You know, but it's the whole culture now is being a victim, because the thing is, it's natural. Let's think that you've felt marginalized, right? Based on race, based on gender, sexuality, no matter what it is. And when you then feel that, all right, I can set myself free. And the idea that you're setting yourself free means that someone held you down. And then you feel that, you know, I have to stand up for myself and I have to fight. And, or that being a victim is then blaming the other ones. And, you know, the delicious thing about being a victim is that you have all the rights, you have no responsibility, and you can feel entitled. And young people have now for 2 or 3 generations been groomed into entitlement. When we're told that you deserve everything, you have parents that give, you know, and make no demands, no expectations. And it means that they don't take education seriously. This is also why we have so many silly educations now, because we don't feel anymore in our culture that we're responsible for our own survival. Society is, someone else's. So we should have everything because we've been told that we deserve it. And when we don't get it, you know, it's because of them, not because of us, because we are wonderful simply because we exist, right? We should win the prize always because we are wonderful. We've been told that we're wonderful and deserve everything our entire lives. And I think this is now peaking in our civilization because this cannot go on. And so, you know, when you have all of these groups and everyone belongs to a marginalized group somehow, and we can then declare victimhood because we know, oh, we'll get money, you know, we'll get support, we'll be in the right, and everyone will respect me because I can demand better service. And it's natural when it works, we will all go there. It's complaining about the service, right? That's what victimhood is, and we do it, you know, again and again because we feel that we're not mastering life anymore. It's too complex, it's too difficult. And I've said there are 2 ways to win. One is by having success and winning the traditional way, or being the best victim, because being a victim throughout history has been the fallback plan. It's plan B. It's making people feel sorry for you, right? If you're sick and you make yourself extra sick, you can make people do what you want them to do. That has been a strategy that has worked because in a group, we need to take care of each other. So in a small community, if you are responsible for a specific task and you get sick, it affects everyone. So it's everyone's interest to then nurse you back to health and to support you in whatever way, because that's an investment. So it's in our genetics. And now when society is this big, we don't know who to manipulate, so it becomes everyone. So it's like just being a victim We can demand that others listen to us and we get what we want. It's the survival strategy that's in us. And again, when we feel that we can't win, because now in the old days, we basically were competing against our peers in a small community. And it's not only our own country anymore, it's the whole world. So the mountains have become too big. And most people feel like losers by default. And when you feel like a loser, I can't climb this mountain, you will go straight to plan B. That's a logical conclusion. And this is the reason why we have this wave of victim culture now. Because so few people believe they can climb to the top. But maybe they can whine and complain themselves to a better position at least and get some of that, whatever it is. And it works. But when everyone's entitled, right? When everybody sits there and wants attention from everybody else, it doesn't go well. And we're kind of getting to that point. And then we have to fight over who's the bigger victim, right? Who's more marginalized? Who's got the more rights? And that is also starting to play out. But it's important, again, yes, back to being a spiritual student, we have to snap out of this. We cannot be part of it. Whenever you see yourself as a victim, please don't. Whenever you feel entitled, please don't. The world owes you nothing. If anything, you are here to bring something into the world. You are here to make something of yourself. And it's all up to you. It's for you to find your talents. It's for you to find your skills, to find your purpose, to bring something to the world. If you want love, give love. If you want recognition, you have to give recognition. If you want respect, you have to give respect. You have to give what you want. Entitlement is poison. And spiritually, when we gradually wake up, we understand that we're completely responsible for everything. We're not responsible for what other people do. We are responsible for our own part in the co-creation and for us being present, part of it. Also being in the receiving end, we're also responsible for how we affect other people. We are responsible. And when we identify as the responsible, we start looking for the opportunities. When you realize, oh, it's up to me. It's actually, I have to take care of myself. I have to use what's given to me and make the best out of it. Then we will do exactly that. When we think someone else is responsible, we will just wait for someone else to do it. And this is a part of our culture now that is very, very unhealthy. So, if you are a sincere spiritual student, you will always make the best of what you have. You will always try to be the best version of yourself. You will always try to set the example. You will never complain. If you want something changed, well, contribute to the change. Do something productive. Make the world a better place. You don't do that by complaining that is terrible. Right? We have to look at how we think, how we feel, what we say, and what we do. Are you part of the solution or are you part of the problem? Right? We always have to confront ourselves.
Thank you, IKYA. I think that's actually a beautiful place to conclude for tonight. And Due on YouTube had asked about methods that we could all practice to be more in harmony with ourselves and each other, and it sounds like that's exactly what you gave us, you know, drop the victim consciousness and bring the best version of ourselves forward.
I'd like to comment some more around that, because when we understand that we are the starting point in our own life. Everything we experience is the echo of what we send out. If you want something else than you're getting, if you understand that what you're getting is the echo of your own voice, if you say, that sounds terrible, well, learn to sing better. Right? It's always change what you do. If we want harmony, meditate every day. And I completely understand this life form is reactive. We get triggered because we think that the world is a starting place and then we are affected. Right? That's the horizontal way of looking at things. And this is how we are thinking in this society as part of the victim culture. If we understand it's the other way around, what I experience is the echo of my own consciousness. Everything that I'm sending out is being shown to me so that I can understand what I'm sending out, so that I can understand what's in my own consciousness. It's being basically pulled apart and deconstructed so I can see the ingredients in what's going on inside of me. So, to remove ourselves from that kind of echo game, we need to connect directly. Because the wonderful thing about spiritual practices is that you don't have to go through the echo. You don't have to wait for what's in your mind to manifest, and then you can fight it and maybe discover it. In meditation, you get a connection that is direct, right? So you basically cut through all of that, and you can communicate with your higher consciousness, with your higher self, with God, whatever you want to call it. And it comes directly into your mind, into your body. So it will not be lost in translation the same way it does when it goes kind of through the world, because again, it's so easy to get sidetracked by the cultural narratives. So having spiritual practices with that very clear intention of connecting directly, right? And not then, oh, please help me because I'm a victim. That's a terrible way to start meditation. So, eradicate you wanting help. Just connect with what is and have the intention of getting clarity, getting insight, getting better connection and better flow. If you should ask for anything, it's to how can I bring more into the world? How can I be of service? How can I be part of a change? Right? You should open your flow and bring it in. Higher up, you're always in harmony. You're always in a state of love. But it's when we deal with our karma that we forget and we lose balance. Right? So any form of spiritual practice where you have the concrete experience or feeling that you're connecting, do that. I strongly advise people to meditate every morning, because it's a better way to start the day, to start by connecting, to let the flow come through, to kind of cleanse your mind, and then you start the day. We need to get into a kind of space where it starts within and then expresses. So through that, we will not be distracted, we will not fall into the cultural misconception of the world doing something to you. You will recognize yourself as the creator, as the co-creator, as the one, broadcasting, the one sending everything out, and then it being reflected. You can see it. And then you can play with it. You can have fun with it. Remember that you are without limits. You are all powerful in essence. There is no limitation in the universe. What you are experiencing in the outer world are the limitations in your own consciousness. And that's why whatever you experience in the world as limiting, yeah, it's because it's a replica. It's a rendering of the exact same types of limitations in your consciousness, and life is just showing it to you. So by dealing with that, you can heal the limitation in your own consciousness. We have to be aware of the spiritual process and the spiritual path and why we're really here. Our culture can offer you nothing. Our civilization, in their ways of thinking and narratives, can offer you nothing. You will be confused, you will lose track. We need spiritual practices more than ever. So try to muster enough discipline to sit down and connect every day, and to try to work with your life and with everything that's happening in your life from that starting point. Because when you not only see yourself as responsible, but because it doesn't mean that you're blaming yourself, it's simply seeing you are the creator, you have the freedom already. You are free, you're endless, you're all powerful, everything is already given to you. And then it's a matter of, what do I do with it? And then life will be your playground where you're trying to unfold as much as possible. And then your dialogue with life will be different, because you're going to say, oh, the world owes me nothing because the world doesn't really exist. It's just a huge chamber where I can explore myself and my own talents and whatever is inside of me. I can then reach for my potentials and see how they work in real life. You're here to become greater than you were before you incarnated, to become more intelligent, to lift yourself to a higher level, to be more healed, more loving, to be stronger, to be more magnificent than you were before you incarnated. You're here to grow in all directions at the same time. And you can. Everything is there. Everything is in the world. Everything is in you. But we live in a culture that is telling you that you're entitled. And by that thought, you block yourself. You block all your potential growth. Because then you believe you can't climb the mountain. But I'm telling you, you can. And you will, because it's your mountain. When it's your mountain, it's for you to climb. And you will never be presented with a mountain you can't climb. You have everything you need. And it's your job to climb it, to do everything you can in this lifetime to aspire to your highest potentials, to your highest levels of strength and intelligence, love, empathy, harmony, all of these things. That's why you are here. Nothing is holding you back. Nobody is blocking you. The big they does not exist. It's you and life and the dialogue, with the only purpose of bringing you to your highest consciousness and your highest potentials. So start with that focus every day and live your life as a free, creative, spiritual being, because that is what you are, and that is what your journey is all about.
And with that, we say thank you for tonight. Thank you, IKYA. Thank you all for joining us. With the Easter holidays coming, we have a 2-week break coming up. So we will not see you until the second Monday of April. So we look forward to that. No, actually that's the third Monday of April. I apologize. So we have 2 Mondays off. Again, this is IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and the only program out there where you can get this kind of real spiritual advice for your journey. There's nothing else like it out there. So please follow us on YouTube, IKYA on YouTube, IKYA.official on both Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And perhaps most importantly, please share IKYA Live and our channel on YouTube with others that might benefit from taking that higher perspective on the events happening in the world around us to lift the discussion and hopefully make the world and our lives better for everybody. So again, thank you from IKYA Center in Oslo, Norway. This has been IKYA Live.